Good morning, everyone. I've had apologies this morning from Councillors Dave Merritt, Jane Burson and Lindsay Burr.
Thank you, members. And those who arrived a little bit late, please do use your microphone and speak into it because the acoustics in this room are not good. Apologies for absence. We've had minutes of the previous meeting. I think we're happy with the minutes of the previous meeting. Declarations of interest, looking around, not seeing any. Public participation, I don't believe we have any.
That's right, Chair. No public questions or statements received.
So moving on to Mike, the budget, and I'm not going to go through all the letters.
Yeah. So there are three budgets for members. What I'll do is I'll take you through each one individually and offer opportunities for questions after each.
Speaking to the mic, please.
Okay, not here. Is that better? So, as we did here, there's three papers on the agenda today. I'll go through each one individually and give opportunities for questions after each paper. The first paper is generally a summary paper that explains what the other two papers are. So effectively, as a combined authority, overall a combined authority has three budgets. It has its general budget, which are the activities funded through government around regeneration, funded transport, those sort of activities. There is the Mayor's general budget, which are the functions linked to the Mayor's specific powers, which are typically funded partially through precepts. And in the context of the budgets you're reviewing today, the Mayor's general budget comprises entirely of the Fire and Rescue Service budget. We also have Police Service and former Office of the OPFCC budget, which follows an entirely different governance stream through the Police, Fire and Crime panel, so it won't be as. That is broadly a summary of the first those budgets. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on to the detailed reports?
You look like you're free to go, right?
Okay. So, first report, paper 5.1 is the Mayor's general budget paper. So, as previously explained, this is where powers rest with the Mayor personally rather than the combined authority. And these go through a separate approval process, and you'll see in the report in Appendix 5, there is an outline of the legal process that an approval takes. As I said, for this year, the Mayor's general budget comprises only the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, which obviously covers York and North Yorkshire. And the Mayor's not sought to raise a precept, which is part of this approval process for any other process. Combined authority will undertake a two-step approval process of this budget, so it will see a draft budget on the 27th of January, as the Mayor is required to present his draft budget before the end of the month. And they will ultimately see the final budget on the 7th of January after consideration by the Police, Fire and Crime. And the Mayor would have been advised on any points that they may have and reflect that in the report to the combined authority. So moving on to the detail, as I said, this is purely the budget and details for the fire service. In terms of context, the fire service is currently in a fairly difficult financial position, has low levels of reserves, and it's currently being accessed to support in-year cost pressures around staff, high levels of borrowing, and its debt service costs are currently fairly significant, being around 10% of its revenue budgets. The service has suffered from quite a high level of historic underinvestment, including the impact of a precept freeze that happened between 2011 and 2014, and the cumulative impact of that precept not being raised year on year is estimated at impacting the service by about £21 million to date. So there's a large amount of money that's gone out of the service potentially there. This year, the service has received a fairly difficult blow. It's lost around 1.4 million of income versus the initial expectations. 1.2 million of that income from central government is on cash terms, and that's due to the loss of the Rural Services Grant and the Services Grant and funding guarantee that was previously implemented by government has changed. Alongside the difficult funding settlement, there's a number of cost pressures that have arisen year on year, particularly around staffing. Those staffing costs are driven by the nationally negotiated staff settlements that Fire has, so there's limited or no scope for them to reduce those costs once they maintain services. Also, the challenges around scopes of services. As you'll be aware, the current environment and climate has increased risk of flooding and wildfires. Fire service is not actually funded to support flooding, which is a key issue. It doesn't statutorily have to do so, but it's the only service which can. And part of this whole process is that there's limited financial resilience in the service to respond to that sort of issue, particularly as a region, we see a lot of incoming tourists, students who are seasonal visitors, and funding formulas tend to work for residents. So in general, services disadvantage. As a need for investment, ageing fleet, some of the fire appliances are in excess of 15 years old at the moment. There is a programme to replace those underway, which is partly funded by the proposed precept increase in this budget. And we're only now looking to replace some of the safety equipment for firefighters, one of those being breathing operators. Doesn't include the telemetry that you would expect in a modern service, which lets you know where fire officers are in burning buildings. So it's a key safety consideration as you move further. And investment is also needed generally to support the development of the service and make it a more modern and efficient service. The solution that the Mayor's come up with alongside the Chief Officer to deal with it is into the precept. As the Fire Authority was dissolved and the responsibilities for fire and rescue services came into the Combined Authority in May, the Mayor funds partly that service through a mayoral precept, and the Mayor has flexibility to raise that precept without limit. Previously, the Fire and Rescue Service was subject to a cap on that precept. Therefore, in order to stabilise the finances and allow for future investment, a precept increase of 24%. Precept increase will cover the 1.6 million revenue loss earlier, approximately 4 million of increase in operating cost base, principally the staffing costs and other inflationary factors. It will allow the reserves to be built back to a more sustainable level. Currently, they're around 3% of the reserves, ultimately looking to be raised to around 5%. That will rebuild resilience to allow the service to respond to some of those issues I talked around earlier in terms of increasing demand. And it will also allow funds to be set aside for capital investment year on year to support service development and put things on an even keel. In terms of that solution, there's been a consultation that took place across November and December and ended on Monday, which asked the public to determine whether they would be willing to support the service. And that consultation has received strong public support for investment in service. And it's also worth pointing out that the consultation was introduced prior to the funding settlement, where it was anticipated that a more mid-range, so the range of the consultation were £6 precept increase, £15 precept increase, £24 precept increase. The majority of the consultation period covered a £15 precept increase might have been broad enough to allow for investment, but with some of the funding challenges the services has had, that was put into that consultation. People were let know that it was more appropriate for a higher precept level at £24 to support that investment level. The results show strong support for an investment in the service, with around a third in each precept level in that consultation. In terms of other things that the service has undertaken, within the report you'll see that there's been a savings plan that is currently being implemented that is taking out around £400,000 non-pay costs, but also some of the investments that are being made will make sense. Well, as previously mentioned, there's limited scope for further savings around staffing without impacting on services, as the salaries and wage levels for both staff and fire officers are nationally negotiated, and often by fire service stronger positions than ours, which means that they tend to be challenging for us to cope with. So, in summary, as members, you asked to consider in the context of the recommendations of the authority, but that's the overview of the fire. At that point, I'll make 20 questions.
I'm sure you're going to get questions. You might get comments. What actually, I've read the papers, but just to be clear, the increase of £25, what does that on about D? What does that equate to total finances to the the fire service.
I think in the report, I'll get this wrong.
£7.02.
That's the precept value. In terms of income to the fire service, I think it's around £30 million. I'll check that in the report now. So there is a table. There's a table under paragraph 5.7 in the report, which looks at government funding, council tax funding to do overall spending power, and it shows that the overall council tax requirement for funding is 26.1 million. That's an 8.5 million increase on prior years.
Thank you. Councillor Foster and Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'm really interested in that the lack of investment in our fire services over so many years. I want to say it's about time somebody addressed it, and I actually think it's right that the Mayor does address this. And we obviously have a lot of climate issues going on with flooding, wildfires that need sorting out that are going to possibly get worse. And I'd like to say I support the Mayor in actually putting the funds in. Unfortunately, I'd rather the national government do that. They obviously refused to do that over many years. Not just any government, just the government of the day. So somebody has to address this, and I'm glad the Mayor is starting to address this. Thank you.
I'll just respond to that, Chair, as well. There was a consultation around the national funding settlement provisional, and the fire service has some sentiment that you expressed there around the
But I mean, I am aware that all the mayors have got together and made this to the national government as well, and saying that it's not quite enough to do it and they have to deal with it. So, I mean, the sooner it gets an answer, the better it is. But thank you very much for the report.
Tonight.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the national insurance changes. What steps being taken to account for that? And because there seems to be a big hole there.
So in terms of this budget, I think it notes in one of the paragraphs that there still remains some uncertainty around some of the aspects of the funding system. So currently it's based on best estimates. My colleague Michael Porter, who's the finance lead for fire, has reviewed the national insurance part of this based on a high level calculation around what the national is for fire services on national insurance and how that's likely to be allocated across the services. I think the report he mentioned that he expects to recover based on the increase in our national insurance costs around half that. I think it was, and that is because our service relies on more than average level of on-call. So our national insurance bill goes up and down. And I think the way that the expectation is that the funding settlement for national insurance will apply before an average level is a bit too simplistic for service. But that will remain to be seen as to what the final settlement is. One thing is outstanding.
Yes, can you just, I'm just confirmed the half is is a worrying figure. What actual steps are being taken to provide protection for the other half?
In terms of providing protection for the other half?
Well, where that money is going to, where's it going to come?
Well, there is a settlement for national insurance, so fire services and all public bodies are being supported for the increase in national insurance. So in the context of this budget, it's just what we anticipate getting does not cover the full cost of our national insurance increase. So we know we will get a settlement that has been announced in the provisional funding settlement, but we don't know exactly how much that will be. The assumption this paper considers, based on the amount of money we know is available, the size of the services, the size of our service relevant to those, makes an estimate of that amount. Ultimately, within this, the other 50% is covered effectively by the precept, because that is funding the loss of the other pieces of government funding. And ultimately, if we were to get worse news than we anticipated around the national insurance funding a settlement, that would lead to a reduction in the amount of funding we would ultimately have. So moving forward, at that point, we need to cut our cloth.
I've Councillors Fisher, and then Rowley, and then Waller, and then Packer.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be a comment followed by a question. On 628, it says that the majority of cashable efficiencies have been date, including the change to Huntington to an on-call fire station. That was something I opposed very strongly. I had a meeting with Zoe Metcalfe, the former Police Crime Commissioner, and told her, along with many other councillors of all parties, what we thought of that decision. Told us that house fires were very rare. An hour later, a mile away, a house burned down in Wigginton. So they're not rare. The Huntington station was turned to on-call. We were told that the delay in response times, according to the commissioner, was 5 minutes. The fire brigade said it was, Union said it was probably going to be 15 to 16. In November, a house caught fire in Windmill Way in Haxby. It started in a 170-detached bungalow. Before the fire service arrived, it spread to the roof of the next one, as a result of which an 84-year-old lady is going to have to spend the next 6 months out. It was criticised by people from all parties. My fellow councillor at the time, Councillor Paul Doty, a man I have enormous respect for, a Conservative, said it was a terrible decision. So it was not just the opposition saying this. If you're going to put a £17 precept increase, I think you're going to find it very, 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 very hard to sell it to the people of North York who have seen a degradation in their service. There is no question about this. There are 30,000 people served by Huntington Fire Station. Can I ask, please, are there any plans to look at, again, at that decision to put Huntington as on? Could I ask for a formal review of the situation in view of what's happened? Thank you.
Councillor Fisher, I think in the context of that comment, I think I'll note that and take that to the mayor officer and the deputy mayor, then to consider. It's a bit more operational than I can give us consider that answer on. Okay, if I do that.
I'll just say, I haven't yet found out the actual response times and where people went, but I'm digging on it because it is a concern to the people of York North, certainly.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of guess that, you know, we recognise that the Mayor and the Combined Authority are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here. Clearly, the books need to be balanced. I'm uncomfortable in any increase in taxation and a 28% increase on the precept. However small it might be numerically, the reality is it's a huge chunk that we're asking these people to pay. So that's just a comment. And then another concern that I have, and this is in any way, it's not meant to be any kind of a comment about the competency of officers. I thoroughly do recognise the work that officers do. We often see reports, and reports are underpinned by consultations that somehow give some credence and some relevance to the report. In this particular consultation, bear in mind that we have a combined population of 800,000 people in this combined authority area, and the responses were 1,153. I think we need to be really careful by trying to underpin suggested changes and increases by saying we've gone out to consultation and generally this is what was expected and what was kind of agreed. So no real question, Chair, but just some comments that I think are really important to note.
Well,
thank you, Chair. I think the £24 increase in percentage terms is quite significant for this element. And I think the public will rightly say, this is what is this about? And I think there does need to be visibility of the representation that has been made to government for a fairer settlement for the fire service, a fairer formula which recognises the pressures on this area in terms of morality and population. And fairness in matching the rise in national insurance contribution. It should be passported 100%. So there shouldn't be a hole in that. So I think understanding what letters have actually been sent. I'm very aware that mayors get together and have lovely receptions. But what I want to do is to see what facts have been put down on behalf of residents living in York and North Yorkshire, and the response that has come from government. And as a very minor point, York City Council finished in 1996, so I was very young then. If we could have that factored in. But I think that the elements that people will want to see, this scrutiny saying, what's going on here? I think there just needs to be greater visibility of representations being made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think in general terms, I agree with what Councillor Kevin Foster has said. It's interesting to hear people suggesting that the problems that we've got are somehow the result of the government that's been in power for 6 months, rather than one that was in power for 12 years and the fire service in this area was subject to appalling underinvestment. So this seeks to address that, and I think we've got to address it. I think Kevin's right when he points out the issues relating to climate change. We've seen plenty of examples about how that is affecting people around the world, and you need an efficient and a well-resourced fire service to address that. And I think this achieves that. The one question I did have relates to paragraph 453, which says it adds 1 million per year into a change for new developments reserve. My question was, firstly, is the new change in developments reserve that 1 million, or is there already some in it and that adds a million? Because as much as I've looked through this, I couldn't find that out. And my second comment is, if it's just a million, then we're going to struggle a bit, aren't we? Because a million's not a great deal of money, and you might just about get a fire tender for that, I wouldn't think. And going on from that, I noticed Councillor Tony Fisher as well has mentioned his issues. I will mention, because this is my opportunity to, the fact that the settlement I live in, which has grown immensely in the last 10 years by 43%, and has an industrial estate which employs 10,000 people, has no fire station at all. The nearest one is 6 miles away. And I don't care what they say about how quickly they can reach us. The fact is that on that industrial estate, there are chemical factories, there are areas where there are hazardous substances, and I hope when we come to review this in the spring, that will be taken into account, because without some sort of improvement in the fire service in that area, we are in serious trouble. Thank you.
Just responding to the technical part of that question around the new developments and change reserves, because the precept is an annual recurring set level involved. That £1 million is £1 million each year in the next 4 years. So that builds up to a level of 4 million by the end of the medium-term financial plan period. But the expectations would be that will be spent along that time and investing.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I've got to just respond to the point that Councillor Packham was making at the start, which was that, yeah, I'm sorry, but it is right to blame the current government for imposing employer national insurance increases. Those people who voted on July the 4th for change thought that they were voting for change for the better. It's turned out to be change for the worse. Particularly here in North Yorkshire, where at the stroke of a pen, the government have removed £14 million of rural support grant and have imposed burdens upon small businesses, which are making many consider their staffing positions. I've spoken to one this morning who's decided not to fill a vacancy that she's got at the moment as a direct result of the increase in national employers' contributions. National insurance contributions, and public services should have been protected from those increases in national insurance contributions in full. because the government claimed that by introducing the charges and the costs to employment, that no individual was paying more in tax as a result of the proposals placed by the Chancellor in the budget. Well, of course, they are paying more because they're paying more here, directly as a result of having to foot the cost of the employer's national insurance increase, which is seeing this tremendous increase in the proposed precept that people are paying to provide the fire service in North Yorkshire. So they are paying more directly in tax as a result of Rachel Account's decisions last November. And it's shocking, quite frankly, that public bodies are not being properly protected for the costs that the government have imposed. This council, North Yorkshire Council, as a direct result of the government's actions, nobody else's, the government, is £7 million worse off before we start looking at our budget. And I'm sure that's the same in the City of York Council as well. So rather than helping local government and public bodies, this government have given them a kick in the teeth. And so that's why people are rightly angry that the government that promised so much is delivering so very little.
Foster.
I'm correct in thinking that actually the fire service has borrowed on their capital budget in the past, so they're actually out.
In terms of the fire services current borrowing approach, pretty much any capital equipment is borrowed sustainably. So that includes everything from the appliances over long term to 3-year IT.
And that in itself concerns me that I had to do that. So they can't manage on the budgets they're being issued. Thank you very much.
So, from me, I do see a £9 increase directly down to, unfortunately, alterations in taxation. You know, rural support dropped 600,000. You know, the mayor expected to be able to do this off a £16 increase. After the settlement, it had to be a £25 increase. I agree we need it. I agree that we need to protect our fire services. Our fire service is struggling and does need that help. We are having to lose fire stations in areas because we can't afford to keep them running. I look at my own area, which is on, you know, it's a firemen are all sort of volunteers and come and do a fantastic job, but you know, there'll be a time and a place where the volunteers aren't available, and that will cause an issue. But at the moment, they're functioning quite well as a fire service. Actually, there are issues, and there always will be with fires and fire services. If we could predict where and when they were going to happen, we wouldn't need one, would we? From my mind, I think Councillor Wallace's suggestion of how are we actually protesting this to government, I think that is a scrutiny issue that we ought to actually be looking at and getting a response back as to what have we said to government about the 1% increase, about the reduction in rural support grant, which I think is a 600,000 cost, and the fund that we were going to get that we're now not entitled to, and the very little replacement that's coming to cover those. Because at the moment, that is all falling on council taxpayers within North Yorkshire to take that burden. So I would like some, if we can just bring something forward to send off to the combined authority, probably, I'm guessing. Well, no, it's the mayor's office.
We would be happy to countersign a letter from.
I think you ought to, if the committees are to test this, I'm looking round. I know some members might be less so, but I do think all of North Yorkshire Fire is this and its residents. Go for it.
If it helps committee, the police fire and panel have also picked up on this and have also made submissions, and the deputy mayor for police, fire and crime, confirmed that she too has also written a letter that helps.
Thanks. Kevin.
I have to know, so I believe that Police, Fire and Crime was actually supporting the letter sent by the North Yorkshire Council. I think this is more about supporting the mayor and what has the mayor done. Does anybody know what the mayor's done to combat, to go to central government? So if the mayor's written a letter, I'd rather support the mayor with the combined authority for what he's asking for more funding that way. So is there any letter being written by the mayor's government?
I'll find out now. I'll let you know.
He said,
Yeah.
And if the mayor hasn't, I think we ought to imploring the mayor to send something to central government. I think that's what this committee should be doing, shouldn't it?
Yeah, that works.
Yes, I was just going to say that I think we need a formal recommendation, moved and seconded that actually requests as a scrutiny committee to see what representation the mayor has actually made in respect of these increased costs. This is what we're supposed to be doing, is holding the mayor to account. So I want to see what he's already done, not what he's going to do as a result of us having raised the issue. I'd like to know what, if anything, he's already done, what the response was from central government, if he has made any representations, and that we then add our own concerns that we've expressed today, that there are direct costs being passed on to taxpayers in North Yorkshire as a result of the government's actions, and what steps are being taken to mitigate. I think that's the course of action we should be taking, so that we can see what the mayor is actually doing in our name.
I'm looking round, are we? Happy for that to go forward. Have you got that?
Do we need a proposal in a second?
I'm formally proposing.
And I'm happy to second.
My comments on that very letter.
So I've had it proposed and seconded many times by various people. I'm quite happy to just pick on Councillor Waller and Councillor Williams as proposing.
Just have a show.
And then all those in favour of that. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Even though we've noted something, we managed to note something and come up with something. So that's good. Yeah, and we're quorum. We're very quorum now. There's 9 of us. So on that note, do you want to move on to? Are we all happy? Finish with?
Yeah.
Budget, members. Yep. So if you want to move on to the next budget, Mike.
So the next paper is the second budget that I mentioned. This is the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority General Budget. There's core government funding and other grants that the Combined Authority receives to deliver its powers, separate from their own funds. In terms of context for this budget, it's largely based on known and approved funding and planned delivery to date. And it shows a balanced budget with a significant acceleration of activity through the next year, and some utilisation of carried forward advanced funding as the authority benefited from effectively a large chunk of funding before operational. So we're still working through a front-ended funding phase and putting them into delivery. Overall, the expenditure is due to increase to 160 million, 32 million in the prior year, due to an increase in funding. And there's a section in section 4 which tabulates some of those new funds we've got through this year. So as a transport authority, we've got significant transport funding. We have the devolved adult skills fund and the free costs for job fund that goes along with that. We've also been devolved shared prosperity fund and a number of other streams of funding that are outlined in section 4, including a new trailblazer on skills and the Connect to Work programme. So there's a significant increase in funding and delivery requirements as we move through. There's analysis in the paper of core costs, which actually reduced compared to this year by 0.9 million. But that reduction in core costs is largely due to the extent of one-off costs that were involved last year and the years prior due to the setup of the authority into elections predominantly. In terms of staffing costs, there is a staffing cost increase in the core of around 0.8 million compared to last year's budget. Around a third of that is linked to just cost increases on the existing staff base, including the new NI rates, previous pay awards and increments. Being a quite young authority, we don't benefit from incremental drift because we're building rather than having lots of staff churning through. And the remainder of that is headcount growth on our core. The section on delivery programmes, which has been split capital revenue. In terms of capital programmes, we're looking to deliver £102 million worth of programmes. Those, for those of you who are accounting minded, will show up through our statement of comprehensive income as revenue delivery because we're effectively passing through most of these third parties. At the moment, we're not proposing to invest on our own account and build anything. The big part of capital is a significant increase in transport funding. We have the highways in the potholes, and some other capital funding on transport, which is around £73 million. And we'll work with the local authorities largely to deploy the majority of that through existing infrastructure and networks as we move along. We've got continuation and completion of two major programmes that were came around as part of the devolution deal, as the Brownfield Housing Programme and the Net Zero Programme. And there's 2.9 million of shared prosperity capital coming through to combined authority to be deployed as well. And alongside that, for those of you who've been monitoring the decisions through the authority, in July there was a number of calls for project around Mayoral Investment Fund delivery across 4 different streams. And in that capital mix, there's 9.2 million of deployment of the devolved Mayoral Investment Fund based on those July 24 calls for projects. On revenue, the big driver for the growth in revenue spend is largely workforce related programmes. So as previously mentioned, we've got the devolved adult skills funding costs for children. And immediately before Christmas, government announced £13 million worth of funding towards 10 million through a skills trailblazer programme and the remaining 3 million through a Connect to Work programme. Both of those programmes are designed to a lesser or greater extent to encourage people into work, particularly those who've seen barriers to entering the workforce due to ill health or other problems. There's 9 million of transport revenue funding coming through there again. That will be deployed in conjunction with partners in local authorities as they currently hold. And we've got another £8 million coming through the Mayoral Investment Fund on the revenue side of those programmes that went through the call for projects in July, and some shared prosperity as well. In terms of revenue programmes, there's a detailed appendix at the end of the report showing us each programme that we're proposing to deploy funds on. Moving to section 8, I thought it'd be appropriate to include a summary of where we are with the Mayoral Investment Fund and how that's looking across the life of the mayoral term. As you'll see in there, currently into this year we carry £16.5 million, or to next year we're anticipating carrying in £16.5 million worth of advanced funding. We'll receive 18 million further gain share funding in that year, and we're planning to deliver 20.7 million, utilise some of the carry forward excess as we move forward and accelerate. Overall, we've currently committed in terms of planned delivery. We've got remaining uncommitted around 21.6 million of the gain share funding got through, so there's about 27% still to allocate the programme delivery, and those programmes will be developed and allocated over the coming year or so. There's a reserves analysis in section 9, so we have a fairly healthy reserves position due to the advanced funding that we've received. So we're expecting to carry in around 17.8 million of reserves into next year and carry forward 14.6 as we're spending, accelerating our spend. Yes, appendices show, as it was requested by combined authority members, a more granular analysis of transport, as previously mentioned, that full split of revenue programme delivery as we move through. But that's a general overview, but yeah, I think in terms of headlines, it's a healthy financial position, accelerating delivery, and moving forward. Now the mayor's in post with the economic strategy and the mayor's vision to funded through the communities, the options. And at that point, I'll open it up for any questions.
Councillor Williams, do you want to go in?
I just wanted to clarify 2 points. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify 2 points. When you said that 30% of the staff costs increase would you to the existing staff base, weren't meaning that the existing staff base costs had increased by 30%. It was just 30% of the increase on the staffing budget. I just wanted to clarify.
So no, existing staff. Also, it was
It's the mark, right?
So it wasn't those staff that received the 30% increase. It's that 30% of the overall increase was down to those factors which have increased the salaries of existing staff. So I wouldn't want you to think everyone's got a 30% pay rise. It's just the costs have increased by by that, I think it was 800,000.
Right, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't 30%. Because it wasn't clear from your original remark. The only other thing I would like to comment upon is the Maryland Investment Fund commitment. And whilst I understand the need for prudence and ensuring that we don't just commit resources to projects willy-nilly, I am concerned that the whole point of having this additional resource coming into North Yorkshire is for it to be spent to actually deliver something, and having a carry forward at £14 million, the end, what looks at the end of this financial year, that's 2 years into the 4-year term, does seem to me to be money which would be better off actually being invested into projects in North Yorkshire rather than sat in the bank.
Can I just respond to that? In the context of how the budget was being built, obviously as the authority, we're continually developing the interventions we'll put in the market, and we are I guess catching up a little bit because a lot of this funding came in the period pre-May, before the mayor was appointed and the priorities and things were planned. What will happen in year is if there are further opportunities to commit these funds, we will. But I've just made this budget based on what we know we are currently committed to do now, because otherwise it would be finger in the air. We'd expect to deliver, create a number of new programmes and deliver that solution. And the strategy teams, and I think Andrew's presenting later on the growth plan, there will be new streams of work that come through this year, which will for us to commit that remaining 21.6 million pounds for next year. Sorry, that means to commit that 21.6 million pounds. But I wouldn't put those in the budget because part of this process is making sure we control what we allocate, and the combined authority need to approve those commitments before we budget for the other aspects of things that go through.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the issue of funding transport staff, 1.6, there's 0.3 million to fund the head of transport, which seems quite a generous package. But I'd just like to understand some suggestions that I heard that transport staff from local authorities are being moved into the combined authority in terms of increasing capacity. There are some significant capital schemes which it would have been helpful to have visibility on them being delivered in terms of the basic at the area in front of York Station, which I understand that there's some transfer going on there, and in terms of the outer ring road. I think it's the visibility of those significant projects, and I know a colleague want to follow up on that, but also investment in bus transport, because this is quite a large sum of money, but we don't have much detail in terms of how it's going to deliver improvements to residents on the ground.
I've taken notes on 3 aspects of that comment, Councillor. So if I miss anything, just pick me a minute. So the first one I picked up was around the staffing resource and the head of transport. If it says in the report that the head of transport has a package of 0.3 million, that's a typo because that's him and his team. So that's the resources that the combined authority will hold on transport. That resource is largely using some capacity funding we received from government to look at the solutions for transport moving forward. And so moving on to the staffing that currently sits within the local authority to coordinate buses and the capital transport plans. At the moment, there are no plans to transfer anyone in because that's what's been explored. And clearly, this is people's roles, and a lot of the expertise actually does lie within the local authority partners around transport. So the strategy that's been represented in this budget, and it moves on to the comments you've had around buses and capital, is largely that the assumption is for now we have some resource in the combined authority that looks at what potentially the outcome transport solution is for the wider region, including North York and North Yorkshire, and how the existing transport team particularly develop or work as part of that sort of ecosystem around transport. And that in terms of those funding streams, we're largely a passporting authority to start with. So the big capital programmes that are probably underway in York and North Yorkshire will be undertaken by those authorities as the recipients in the past and up to date of those funding streams. So it's the way we operate this year, because midway through this year, we started receiving this transport funding and we gave effectively a delegation to the local authorities to discharge the powers in relation to transport capital and buses on our behalf. It's likely that as we move into next year, at least for a period of next year, a similar thing will happen until the agreement is reached on how transport for the wider region will be managed, and it will be anything from a range of as is to a completely different solution. Does that answer the majority of your question?
I think I'll come back to you on some of the fine detail, but I think it would be helpful to have in reports to say this that you are aware of as a member of the local authority is being entirely passported to this sum and hasn't been changed, because there are, we're in meetings with them. Oh, well, we're in discussions with West Yorkshire Combined Authority about the bridge at Castlegate. We're in discussions with the North Yorkshire Combined Authority about this. And we need to see visibility of that to say, yes, okay, we can see that those discussions have taken place. We can see what the numbers are and the schemes that they relate to, and therefore it's entirely transparent. I'd like to see that transparency in this reporting. Okay, thanks.
I think when it comes as part of the budget, but certainly something future that ought to go into the future planning of this school is to where these transport budgets are going and what's happening with them. So I think we can bring that forward as part of the work plan later on. Sure we can. Councillor Fisher, Councillor Knight, Councillor Foster, and then Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. My colleague, Councillor Waller, mentioned the York Outer Ring Road. One of the first things I did when I started being involved in politics in 1982 was to campaign vigorously for the York Outer Ring Road to be built as a dual carriageway. It only cost 8 million more apparently then. We're now in the position where we have got a shovel-ready scheme. We spent, I think, £4 million preparing the scheme. And we have about 37 million pounds from, I think it's West Yorkshire Local Transport to improve the roundabout. So that was put on hold because we were then promised we get it dualled. The dualling is so critical to everything around the north of York. We sit in traffic jams every day forever on that, and it's putting business off investing in the area. There are also 3,000 houses which are planned to be built around that area. 970 we gave approval for about a year ago. They're going to be delivered. But all the highways assessment for the others is based on the basis that the ring road will be dualled. And I don't see how those can go ahead unless we have some assurance from the mayor that he's going to look seriously at helping to fund and provide the balance of funding that seems to be disappearing from central government. Central government have not come forward with the money they promised us, that was promised under the previous government. We need somehow to find that cash. Can we ask the mayor, please, to look seriously? He expressed support for the York Outer Ring Road at the last meeting in the question answer. He was quite clear he supported the dualling of the Outer Ring Road. Can we please put pressure on him, please, to act and use some of his mayoral investment or capital transport funding to support that project? Thank you.
I'll feed that back to the mayor. Another point is that currently this budget does not reflect some of the funding that was due through the devolution settlement for transport on North Money, which we may get moving forward. So that will potentially, subject to obviously decisions, allow there to be more capital funding for the region to be things. So this budget has been prudently set up what we expected we're going to get next year.
Thank you. Councillor Waller has touched on what I was going to comment and ask, but I want to just go into the specifics, so forgive me if there's a little bit of duplication. But referring to the bus improvements, It's one of the key pillars of the Mayor's vision. Excellent. So I think we really do need to see that it's a key pillar, that transport is one of his top priorities. And I think this is a comment that Councillor Waller made, but I really think we need to get on with it. We're 6 months in, we still haven't seen any concrete and specific detail of how this is going to be implemented, how it's going to impact on our residents. I represent a ward, Rural West, which is a combination of villages outside York. Buses are either non-existent or very, very poor. And we just can't have this integrated transport system if people can't get onto the step one, which is the bus. So I really, really want to press the Mayor to give us some detail. What is he doing? What is he pressing? What are we going to see that we can share with residents? Because residents want to see how this money is going to be spent and how it's going to impact them. It's no good, it's all right, very well having £6 million, but if 5.5 million of it is going to one specific project or a station development or whatever it is, and it's not improving their buses, that's not helping them. So I'm really keen to press for some detailed reporting on what's going to happen, what the plan is. Thank you.
In terms of that comment, again, we'll feed that to the Mayor. We know this thinking is underway. I think what I would say to this committee is that the reason the budget is presented the way it is because those thought processes are underway. And as we move through the process with the combined authority, and ultimately it could come through this committee as well, is that this budget will develop through the year and become more and more. So I'll feed into the Mayor the comment on the urgency of taking this budget proposition forward. I suspect in the timescales we're in, we don't have the scope to become much more granular because that process is going underway. But certainly, if this committee wants to monitor progress in those things, we can as they come through to next year.
I think it's how we as a committee help come up with policy for that as well, which I think is actually important. It's not just York, it's big chunks of North Yorkshire that are represented in this room. We can help the Mayor with as to what's needed, where and when. On those transportation issues. Councillor Kevin Foster.
Just one for my eyes, I think really more than anything else. When you do the budgets, then chance you can put K for thousands and millions when we look at that figures. It would just make it a lot easier for me to see because some of them are 63. So when it goes, I'll give you an example where it says transport costs, it's got 63. I take it that's 63,000, not 63 million. So if we could put a K near the figures, it would make it really quite easy to understand rather than me studying.
Let's check that whether it should have Ks and millions. That's probably it. Is there a
Just make it a lot easier for me personally.
specific? Is there a specific paragraph that?
Well, just all of them. And then on make it really easy. I don't know if it's just me being a bit stupid.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of going over old ground really, but in point 5, we've got the table of core operating costs, and we kind of went over that relatively quickly, which is fine. And you mentioned that the core operating costs are planned to reduce by £0.8 million. However, in 5.4, staffing costs are forecast to increase by pretty much the same amount, £772,000. What's interesting in that comment is that a third of this increase is because of inflationary cost pressures linked to pay awards and national insurance increases. Again, that the same issue that we faced a moment ago with the last budget. I think we just need to be mindful of. One of the questions that I've got really, and again, it's not for you to necessarily answer here, but to take away, is what use of collaborative working have we got? Yes, I understand we're an independent combined authority, but we work alongside York and North Yorkshire local authorities. What investigations have taken place in terms of staff sharing, secondments, rather than simply just increasing our own staff costs. So that was the question really.
So I'll answer that in 2 parts. In terms of the wider collaboration piece, we actually have a very significant amount of collaboration. So you'll see in the table there, there's SLA costs of £1 million. Those SLA costs are split across North Yorkshire Council and York.
Sorry, can you just say what SLA stands for?
So service level agreement, so it's where we pay a third party, in this case our member local authorities, for access to their staffing reports. So this is, in terms of my area specifically, I have an SLA which provides the majority of my finance resource. I have an SLA procurement resource. Treasury management is through an SLA. It's largely developed that way because we were a new authority. A number of things, it would probably make sense in perpetuity to work in that way on things like treasury management is a great example where North Yorkshire Council have lots of funds on investment, lots of options, lots of economies of scales, and we'll continue to work in that way. And our members are very keen. We have regular meetings with members for us to make sure that as we explore our needs to grow to service the demand that we work with them, and make sure that we're making the best bang for the buck, I suppose, across all of our resources.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on one of the points that Mike Russell made in terms of increased granularity of the budget going forward as the announcements of Transport for the North funding coming into the combined authority as that emerges. Just to get some more detail on how we will see that as the Scrutiny Committee. And two granules that I'm particularly interested in is the pothole money, which a lot of announcements, and it's understanding precisely what strings, if any, there are attached to that. If that's being passported directly to the local authorities, then getting visibility of that, because residents have seen that in the papers and in the press, and they're saying, well, when is this going to arrive? And a specific point, which I'm sure Councillor Jane Burton would raise if she were here, is in terms of support for Diamond City of York, which had been suggested as representations being made to the Mayor. Well, it would be helpful to know when we will see that in the budget. So it's two particular granules, but also the general point of if in the new architecture of devolution there is funding stream coming through, it's understanding how we will see that in order to do our duty.
I guess in the twofold stream response to that, in terms of budgets, will reflect anything that we put through, but perhaps if this is an area that the committee wants to explore in greater detail as the transport strategies and team are developed, it might be worthwhile them presenting the wider transport proposals to the committee once they're formed, rather than tailoring to the budget specifically. The budgets reflect the strategy, so since the strategy and plan would be the first most vital piece of information that would help inform the committee around that.
We're getting a lot of interest in transport, so I definitely do think we need to bring this up as a separate item to deal with the Mayor. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. My background is astrophysics, not economics or accounting, and there's a term here I just don't understand. I'd like it clarifying, please, what it is and how it comes about and what it is. It's the word gain share. I understood that was I always thought that was rewarding employees for improvement of business. I'm not sure whether that means it in this context.
So the gain share is the, I think it's the technical correct term, but it's the colloquial term used across narrow combined authorities for the devolution funding.
Sorry?
For the devolution funding. So the 18.
Oh, right.
We take that gain share, we put it into our investment fund, so those two terms can be interchanged.
But from memory, it's the repayment of business rates from central government back to us if it's an increase in business rates and business rate growth. That was what I was always minded to. That it was if we increase growth within our turnover in North Yorkshire, then we get that back as funding, as business rates funding, central government.
Thank you. That now makes sense.
That's the idea. What game chair is. What was my question? Our costs compared with our investments. So we're looking at about 120 million investments as it stands. Maybe more money come in, who knows what we're going to come out of that. And we've got a 5 million core costs. Is that relatively percentage wise? I know we'll probably have one of the smallest budgets of a mayor or a combined authority.
It's difficult to answer that question because we're still fairly young and growing, and actually I sit on a committee with other finance leads across combined authorities, and this is a question that members ask continually. And us being a young combined authority doesn't help because they're actually across the wider group of combined authorities. There isn't really any benchmark market data. So it's something that can feed in. I think that we suffer is the wrong word, but we're in a position where we're having to build infrastructure in advance of delivery, and also we're quite because we have decisions to make whether we which might be slightly more costly, or whether we can't with our so the value for money structuring is something that we're continually monitoring and other committees are showing interest in. But I think it will take a while, make sure that we're into sort of mature delivery before we can exactly see what that cost delivery ratio will be.
Because all the members of this committee are made up of members of local authorities, I would like at some point for the savings that the combined authority is making towards the local authority's budget, where staff our passports across or whatever, but the delivery remains the same. Be interesting to know that in future years and future reports, just to what savings have been made to the the parent authorities, really. Because I know there will be some somewhere, or there should be some somewhere. If there isn't, then we're not probably doing the combined authority right.
I guess we can look into that one.
It's not for this year. It's
from my perspective, I guess what we will see in the budgets is a resource for delivery. So if a function moved to us from the local authorities, take the resources through. Well, I'm happy to try and track that, but it might be easier to track that in the member authorities than from our side.
I'd like us to scrutinise it here, whoever provides the data. But there was benefits of a combined authority promise, and I think we ought to be scrutinising whether those are materialising or not. So, that's me done. I haven't got any other members on that budget. Do you have one more, or are we? Well done, Mike. Well done for answering the questions, and thanks for that. And obviously take those bits of information back. So, are we moving on to item 6? And is it Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if my voice disappears halfway. I'm here to help if I need it. So this report really just provides an update of where we are in the development of the local growth plan. And as you'll be aware, the development of a local growth plan is a task that was set out as part of the statutory requirement and is part of the new devolution white paper as well. So we've started work on this. We're going through various iterations, and what I would say to start with is that at this point in time, it's very much under development. So you're coming in to this discussion while we are developing that growth plan. We had a briefing session, informal briefing session with members of this committee previously, council of those points, and will continue to do so. And we set out a timetable of when we will develop this, but this is a work in progress. That's what I would say. So what I want to really to go through as I walk through the report really are four key elements of this growth plan. The first element is really to do with what we're classing as the growth plan's growth sectors. So there's already been correspondence between ourselves and government about what we see as being our sort of competitive edge as an economy. Those things that will really contribute to increased productivity, growth in the economy, not only of York and North Yorkshire, but also of the UK. So these are the things that we feel are really important in that context. The second part will be just sort of setting out what we sort of call in local specialisms. We may change the term of this, but things that are really critically important locally, either through employment or large parts of the economy, but also do contribute significantly to growth. So these are set out in the second part. And then something that we're starting to look at, but as I say, noting that there's a lot more work to do, but to try to then start to think about some principles of spatial priorities. So recognising the differences across York and North Yorkshire's economy. And then fourthly, the levers of growth. So these are those enablers to enable the growth sectors to grow, our local economy to grow, and raise productivity, and where we can make those where we would need to make those biggest difference. So there's a section on that. So just going through the report in some sense is that just to cover a bit of background on some stages that we've been through. So first of all, there was a stage in which we were required by government to submit what they called the 3 to 5 key priorities for growth in Yorkshire. And it's been previously agreed by the combined authority. And they included 5 priorities around food farming, engineering, biology, digital infrastructure skills, and place-based development. And they were the initial 5 priorities that we looked at. And we've had various correspondence backwards and forwards, but they've been the basis of how we've built further on the local growth plan. So, as I say, what we then started to do is to split our plan into those sections that I just mentioned. So going through, I think it's section 4.2, the growth sector priorities. We see this as being food and farming, engineering, biology and life sciences, clean energy, rail innovation, and creative and digital, which we've sort of like looked, we're still really working on this, but we've sort of looked at this as being that digital technological side of our economy. We may well split this back down into specific sectors to take account of this, but at the moment, we're just doing some further work to understand exactly the volume and the potential of these particular sectors. So in some ways, they set out our, as I say, what we call our competitive edge, our real growth potential. And then in section 4.3, we sort of started to set out our local specialisms. So these are things, as I say, the key priorities for accelerating economic growth and productivity, but also are important to us because they, as I say, they employ a lot of people and are a particular asset to us. So these are tourism and hospitality, natural capital, which is the broader term for the landscape economy and the importance of our natural assets. Manufacturing, which is beyond the sort of food and farming side, but towards some engineering manufacturing, but also the quite significant bus manufacturing and material manufacturing that we have across our area. And then there's the general specialism around the fact that our economy isn't really made up of really big, large companies, but is actually an economy made up of very micro and small businesses which need incredible amount of support and have the potential to really contribute significantly to economic productivity and growth. And then the fourth section, 4.4, really looking at spatial and place priorities. As I said, this is under development, but this could include anything from the idea of sort of growth corridors through to a rural economy, city economy, coastal economy, etc. But we are discussing this with officers of the 2 authorities and others about how we then start to set out a much more spatial approach to this, so we can identify where some of the opportunities are. But it would also pick around some of our key areas for regeneration opportunities, particularly building on the work around York Central and York, with being scarred in terms of the town deals, the levelling up programme that's going on at Catterick, just to show examples, but it would go beyond that in terms of high streets and towns. You know, the work has been done at Skipton for transforming cities and Harrogate. The final part really is set out on the levers of growth, which really is sort of what we're suggesting is, you know, to be negative, these could be called barriers or constraints, but really are things that potentially, if we could start to get some investment in, start to help to grow those sectors and potential opportunities that we've identified earlier. So these are really set at the moment around our innovation, as we call it, an innovation ecosystem, but the way that innovation works, the connections between business and university and research, how we can get to increase productivity by further innovation in our area and our business sector. Skills being one of those critical important enablers, and as the budget sort of line said, there's quite a lot of funding through the combined authority that is coming through to support, particularly inactives getting into work, but also what this looks at is that broader skills agenda in terms of the types of skills that are required to support the economy. Housing, which was one of our original 5 programmes around accelerated development, but in particularly making sure that we start to build the houses that we need to support the economy, particularly around social rent and affordable, but how we can start to certainly accelerate that side of things. Transport has previously partly been discussed, but a critical part of enabling economic growth and how investment in transport and where that investment is required, which links very closely to the work that the combined authority and the 2 local authorities will be doing on its strategic transport plan going forward. The other one, which I is sometimes classified as a bit of a rural thing about digital connectivity, but I think it just occurs as much to the city than it does to rural. If we're going to encourage further innovation, we're going to encourage further growth in some of our sectors, we really do need the right infrastructure when it comes to digital. And then finally, really to try to attract new investment in. So what we need to be doing around inward investment, putting the right infrastructure in place, and how we can start to accelerate commercial development where it's required. So this is a lot of conversations are currently underway with government departments. A lot of conversations are underway with the officers of the 2 local authorities and other agencies and organisations. We've also had some initial discussions with some business groups and industry groups to discuss some of this. So the next step really will be for us to produce a consultation draft to go to the combined authority in March. This will be really a summary, almost as I've laid out in this report, but with a bit more detail attached to it. The consultation draft will then go out for, as it says, further discussion. I don't think it's just sort of comment on whether things are right or wrong, but actually to start to have an input in what it means and the actions that need to be taken. Then that will develop into the full local growth plan, which we are hoping to get signed off by the combined authority in around July time. So that's the timing of this. There's a bit of an initial work going on with government discussions around the comprehensive spending review, so we want to start to see some early investment into some of these areas. So the timing doesn't always fit, but we will be trying to take some of these emerging priorities to do that. And open to any questions. Thank you, Chair.
I've got a few, but I'm going to have a crack first from the Chair. So sort of financial services, huge in Craven. If we lose one of our industries in the financial services sector, we have an unemployment problem instantly overnight. It never appears in here, and I know why. It's not particularly somewhere we're looking for growth, but it's hugely important. And we've got down here place priorities, local priorities. It still doesn't come through in that. So I'd like to see something around that as we move forward. The thing that I'd never get with this is how we as members feed into what we want to see in our areas. and even local communities feed in. Now, I know there's a consultation going on at the moment in theory, but that's the bigger picture in a way. It's what underlies that and how we respond to change and how we respond to change of, you know, the rabbits out the hat government funding formula, how we pull things together in order to deliver those that work in our area, that we might have something that we can deliver that comes under that list of headlines that normally come with it or list of rules. And I know West Yorkshire, the place panels, and I hate the name, but the principle of something like that across North Yorkshire, I mean, the mayor is one man and he spreads himself very thinly trying to get round things. He only has a small team of officers who spread them. I mean, we have area committees in North Yorkshire, which to a large extent are a toothless talking shop. And it would be great for us to have power. I don't know how you do it in York. That's in a way for York members to do it, but to actually put some effort behind those committees where those committees could come up with the pipeline of projects that we're going to need. And we'll follow the broad guidelines of what the mayor puts down or what's in his priorities. But at least then you've got some elected representative and some other backing other than the mayor saying, I just want to put some money into this because I think it might be a good idea in your area without anybody. And I don't see that forming yet in the mayoralty. And I'd like something that the scrutiny committee comes forward with or comes forward. And like I say, from the York members, I don't want to tell York how to do York, if you know what I mean, but I do think that is something we really do need to pull forward. As this grows, that side of this needs to grow as well with it, I think, because at the moment there is nothing, it's just a big void, really. So that's my point of view. You can answer if you want, or you can be honest.
I'll part answer, I think, on the second part. I mean, on the first part, I think this is why we want to start to discuss further, and I think you make a good point around the financial services, particularly in that sort of South Craven, Skipton area, and Harrogate is particularly important, and York in terms of financial services. I think we can start to include that in part of that local specialism where we have that spatially, and I think that's why we wanted to add the spatial element, because that is something that's quite spatially orientated rather than other. So we'll pick that point up as part of the development of the plan. I think on the second point as well, I think we're quite keen to look at, so this isn't trying to put any model of how we do things, but I think at the moment, all we've tended to do is to work with your economic development teams and other teams within your local authorities to understand what your own local priorities are. But that doesn't go right into the areas that you may be referring to, Councillor Foster. And so it might be that we just need to think about how we engage further into those geographies. So we'll take that one back to have a further think about.
When I say it's not like place plan, that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be made up just of elected members. You know, the business representatives that sit on the business panel and people like that. You know, it should be broader than just a few elected representatives. I have councillors Gavin Foster, Councillor Williams, and Councillor Waller.
I'm just glad to hear you mention Captain Garrison there and the levelling up under the new town centre. But I just want to make sure that one of the areas of growth, that one of the things that is a barrier is transportation. And it's a real challenge in Catterick. The A6136 is being realised as the combined authority key road network. And we've got areas of development, house getting big. I mean, it's great to have these things, but they're no good having them if we can't actually get to them. And there's a real barrier that buses being stopped. So it's really an area that needs looking at. We've got the British Army there as well. So it's something that, again, what Richard said, I agree. How do we filter in from them local things and projects? Because it's massive projects in Catterick Garrison. And we need to, that road is really important. And I have wrote to the mayor personally and your office about there is an opportunity with 2 areas of development, 2 housing, we can put a relief road. It really seriously needs looking at because it'll just be standstill in traffic and we won't be able to move. And areas of growth will be stopped because of that transport links. Thank you.
I'll take that back. I mean, all I can say is that is primarily why we need to have this local growth plan underpinning everything we do, so that this can feed into the transport priorities as well.
I want to reference page 63, and I'm afraid I'm coming back to our Rachel in accounts because yeah, we've got increased the sustainability of farming, and then in the comments, more explicit reference will be made to the financial economic stability of farming. I'd like to know what representations, if any, the Mayor has made in respect of the government's introduction of capital gains tax, which will heavily impact this sector and make farming substantially less viable as a consequence. It's all well and good, this idea that £1 million sounds a lot of money before you start levying capital gains tax on farms. But in actual fact, it's a very low level to set the mark at, and makes a lot of farms, if you introduce the capital gains tax, it creates less sustainability in farming, and it's one of the biggest threats I can see to the sector in North Yorkshire. It's yet another assault on rural North Yorkshire, and so I'd like this scrutiny committee to ask what representations, if any, the Mayor has made in this respect, because we know that the farming community across North Yorkshire is up in arms about the government's plans for capital gains tax. So there's no point having wonderful strategies for growth if central government are actually coshing that sector over the head.
Yeah, I can't. I think that's a question to go back with partly, but what I will say on the farming side is David very quickly after the announcement of the inheritance tax brought together. Brought together a range of farm interest networks, NFU and others. Talked very quickly about some of the issues, and so commissioned a piece of work about trying to understand exactly what the sustainability issues might be around farming and the economic issues affecting farms, so that he obviously could feed more information back into government about the impact. In terms of any other direct involvement David has, the Mayor has had with the government, I would have to take that back to the parents.
Yes, sorry, can I apologise? I meant inheritance tax, not capital gains tax. Sorry.
With the work the Mayor has done on this, and I know he hasn't been silent on this, do we think that we need a submission from this organ, this committee, to find out what the Mayor said?
Yeah.
I'm getting nods from around the room. It's been moved as a second or somewhere.
Yeah, we had a lot of tractors come through York the other day.
Councillor, what seconded that? Are we happy to just ask for what the Mayor's response conversations have been? Do we ask for the conversations, or what? Yeah, what the Mayor's conversations?
Response, I think we
Yeah,
should.
and what? So Mayor's correspondence.
Yes, yeah.
Are we happy for that? I'll just show of hands. Right, thank you. So, are we happy? Ask for that as well. Now, Councillor Waller, Councillor Knight, Councillor Packham, I think. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Or is it?
No,
I think it's you, Andrew.
Right. Okay, I didn't want to jump in. In response to the presentation, I'd like to thank Andrew for including heritage, having banged the drum for it. And I think it's one of those sectors that do set us apart from other regions, as you have that in your patch. And it's useful to have that recognised. And I would identify with digital connection is a problem. In the city as much, and I recognise it in rural areas, it's an enormous problem, but it's not absolutely perfect in York. So there's those constant things to be aware of. The rest of the world is catching up all the time. I think it was good to hear your reference to two-way communication with small businesses, and recognising that small business and micro businesses collectively employ the vast majority of people in the region. So it's helpful for this committee to see what's happening. You said we did, aspects, because I think there is always the danger that the big companies get the lion's share of the attention. And I think what you're trying to do is address that, and it would be helpful to see that. And I think the other aspect is having enjoyed an in-depth presentation on insect carbon accounting yesterday at Scrutiny in York. It's fleshing out all of these environmental strategies, but I should say this is what it means on the ground in terms of skills courses at local colleges on new employment opportunities in real terms, rather than being a theoretical aspect. Oh, we almost reduce our carbon footprint, but actually it's saying these things will happen and your children will have greater job opportunities as a result of investments that are being. Also make a plea for the hospitality sector is that the slogan "Survive in 25" is increasingly becoming a bit of a worry. Therefore, in terms of growth priorities, holding on to what you've already got. And I think we talked about the financial sector in your area, but I think it's recognising we can't lose sight of those sectors that need a bit of support and appreciation at critical times, and factoring that into whatever it is we're saying. We're not taking for granted that every business that currently exists will continue to, and then there'll be these new aspects of the economy. I think we also need to recognise that the discussions that we had on investment in infrastructure leading to increased job opportunities and investment, very similar to the ERDF funding discussions that we had, this funding is replacing. So it's recognising that there are those holistic discussions at a local level that is helpful to engage with cross-party council groups, so that there is a sense of collective buy-in that continues long term, beyond elections of mayors and the like, that there's actually something that people gather around. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks. I think to those points, I think generally there were comments rather than questions, but I do think that one of the points that you raised towards the end is trying to create here a local growth plan that's got some longevity, so we can really get behind it, and that goes beyond the political time or councillors in a sense. And I think we've got to try to build something that does that. I say on many occasions being worked in strategy for many years across North York and North Yorkshire, but I would like a plan to last this time rather than I seem to be rewriting these things very often. So let's hope that's part of this.
Thank you. Yes, there was something that leapt out at me when I was looking through the areas of growth and the things we've talked about, which is the significant number of small businesses, the scientific research, collaboration, innovation, collaboration, academia, and the creative culture and heritage sectors. All these sectors in particular have been affected negatively by Brexit. And I'm just wondering what consideration, if any, was given in thinking through the development plans and growth plans to this, and it's compounded by the proposed tariffs from America. And goodness only knows what else Mr. Trump is going to send our way. So I was just wondering what consideration has been given to that, please. Thank you.
I'm not going to get into the politics of Donald Trump, but I think go off the record. But in terms of those considerations of many different things that affects business and economy and industry, we do quite a lot of background analysis on these sectors and what's affecting them, and how we can therefore put in place as many mitigations as we possibly can. So I think that's where I would come from.
For all,
Councillor Packham had his hand ready. That was a supplementary.
Yeah. Mine's really a spatial question. You've got place priorities, which is the obvious spatial issue. But one of my concerns is that I've seen lots of economic strategies in the past from various people. How far do you discuss your proposals, your thoughts, and how far do you integrate them with for example, the local plan being developed for North Yorkshire at the moment, and presumably with your city plans as well? Because I think it's critically important that if you're going to come up with place priorities in particular, they have to be spatially related through plans.
We have a very close relationship with both local planning authorities, and I've been on many groups and continue to be on many working groups with, particularly at North Yorkshire as they develop their new local plan, but also as the City of York as well. So we meet them regularly to take those particular points into account. Because without either side, it won't work.
The reason I ask that is because I find it difficult from what you've produced so far to get the sort of spatial ideas of to what impacts it's going to have. And clearly, given the massive level of development that we might well have in North Yorkshire, and particularly we hope growth, we do need to know what the impact of that is going to be on the local plan, and we need to know as well, I think.
Yeah, sorry, do you want me to? Yeah. Yeah, we'll pick that up a bit further, but we are looking at, we haven't done a lot of work here yet on specific spatial things, but we're having that discussion, and there's certainly some work being done as part of a local plan in terms of setting out sort of economic opportunities, the employment impacts, etc., that are going into the local plan process that we would be also taking into account as we develop this. But it's a two-way conversation that we're having with the local planning authorities.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure it was a supplementary from before, so forgive me. That's okay. Councillor Wallace slightly stole my thunder, but I'll move it on a bit further. Digital connectivity. The last government spent heavily on digital connectivity, and it was very high in terms of their priorities. I haven't seen anything in the last 18 months. But in terms of the combined authority, it's on the Levers for Growth plan. I'd like to see us, as this committee, see a little bit more about how that's working, what it's doing, and I think in terms of the work plan, the work programme, I'd certainly like to see a piece around about digital connectivity come to this committee so that we can have a look at that and scrutinise it correctly.
well, I'm next, but noted already. Councillor Williams, brain's gone.
Can I against the work plan second that proposal? I also want to just take the digital connectivity issue up, because there are still numerous mobile phone black spots across the area, and there's nothing more frustrating than if you're using your Bluetooth and trying to hold a business conversation as you're driving from one meeting to the next, and the call drops because you've hit a signal black spot. And I can speak from personal experience, knowing that there are at least 4 of those black spots on the road between London and Paley Bridge. So there will be literally hundreds of these across North Yorkshire, which stop people doing business. And then just to also feed on to the point that Councillor Waller was raising, because I visit York on a very regular basis, most of my friends actually live in York, and I share their frustrations that often on a weekend, if you go to the centre of York, you're left with your phone hanging in midair, trying to get access to the internet because the capacity simply isn't isn't available. And the same happens in Central Harrogate as well. I've experienced it there. These are real issues that hold back growth and hold back the visitor experience, because there's nothing more frustrating if you're a visitor somewhere and you're actually trying to research on your phone where to go, and you can't actually get onto the internet because the capacity isn't there. And so we have this assumption that actually urban areas are well served by mobile phone networks and functioning fine. And in actual fact, often nothing could be further from the truth, and particularly with Central York, and I know from personal experience, on race days and other busy Saturdays can be an absolute nightmare to try and get your phone to function at all. So these are, I think, issues that we should be looking closely at and scrutinising progress on, because these are quite rightly identified as these grades, and these are the priorities that we should be seeking progress on.
I don't think of anybody else round. Work in progress. We're happy to note the work in progress. I didn't actually check to see if you're happy to note the last report. I remember now, so we're happy to note the last report. Happy to move on then to item 7 on the English devolution white paper. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this fairly brief. It's quite mindful of the time. I don't have the details to hand for reasons I'll explain. In terms of timing, this is probably the best place to raise the issue. Still probably sure to be able to provide you with the detail because members are still digesting it. The English devolution white paper was produced on 16th December. It was a little later than anticipated. It came right before the Christmas break. But it did contain a number of policy commitments that we've probably been expecting, and probably one or two that we haven't. So this paper provides a bit of a summary of what we know so far. But as the white paper itself explains, this is subject to quite extensive legislative change to put any of them into effect. So what we know at the moment is that the government are looking at the governance structures of combined authorities. They're looking to categorise combined authorities into 3 areas. There will be foundation strategic authorities, which are new and emerging combined authorities, county combined authorities, non-mayoral combined authorities. Then looking at strategic authorities, which are mayoral authorities in the usual structure that we have at the moment. And then we have established strategic authorities. Those are the larger combined authorities like West Midlands, Manchester, that have integrated funding settlements. The white paper goes on, it sets out a broad framework for how a combined authority or strategic authority can achieve that established status, which is by having in place very robust established delivery methods, established and very compliant audit and compliance arrangements. And there would be a period of some months or years in order to achieve that. Outside of the broad structure of the combined authority, it is setting out some expectations and further amendments to the powers that combined authorities and strategic authorities deliver around skills, transport and housing, as well as recognising the role of mayors and their convening power in respect of pulling together other public bodies, both in terms of the usual public body delivery models, but also in terms of the resilience model in responding to emergencies and so on. So the paper that I present, I won't go through it paragraph by paragraph because I'm sure members have already read it in that way. There is a link to the full document, but I would hand over to yourself, Chair, if there's any questions from members. I'm sure we can answer them as best we can, the officers that we have in the room, but I suspect this will probably be an area where we will continue to come back to the committee and to the combined authority where some of these individual policy areas begin to emerge and show some impact.
I've sort of had a look at the white paper. Not sure it affects us too much yet. I think it will. I think things will come into it that will affect us, but as it moves forward and the discussions go on. I think it's something to come back to, really, isn't it, for us to digest and possibly respond to as an ONS, or do we let the combined authority and will we see the response from the combined authority? I think before it goes, would it be worth us having a look at it?
It's not so much a consultation exercise, but it gives policy directions in respect of many areas that the combined authority is working on at the moment. So some of them will be trajectories we're already on, others may be changes in direction or policy direction in future. So we'll feed them back as they come. There was a question as to whether this would be the right meeting to bring this to, given that we don't know a great deal about it at the moment. We're waiting on the English devolution bill.
Yeah.
But as it has been published and this is the next available meeting, I think it's worth flagging because this is going to be a cross-cutting policy document.
I mean, personally, it's just, we know that it's out there and see where it goes. But Kevin?
I just propose that we just note the report, Chair.
Great. So on that note, are we to move forward to the work programme? Having noted that for now. Great when you're in something and somebody decides to change it, but when you're not in something and you know you're going to get one, I think those people are a lot more worried.
Yeah.
So work programme, have you been picking up our comments as we've gone along, William? Have you got yourself a bigger list?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just next meeting is in March. Obviously, as you were saying, there's been several suggestions brought up in this meeting that I've taken note of. We'll feed into the future work programme. There's an activity I think you mentioned, transport, and seeing what we can do in those areas to bring through the level of detail that we were asking for.
Well, I would just say with the local growth plan, can we have something about how it's actually going to function locally? Because it's obviously going to come into it and how it's going to be fed into. Any sort of thoughts on that? It won't be our choice, it'll be the mayor's choice how he wants to enact with us, won't it? So that's a roll.
Thanks, Chair. Can I suggest that the sessions where the mayor is there to answer questions from us, that certain areas of discussion that we've had this morning can be on those particular meetings. So, for example, I'd like to be able to talk to and ask the mayor direct questions about transport, for example. Whilst the digital connectivity is really important, that may be not one immediately for the next kind of mayoral session. So I think planning what we're going to be putting on the work plan in regards to when the mayor's going to be there and not.
And to agree that we could do with having those debates in front of there in the room, when it's there.
Thank you. Just on that point, will the update of it as a written report in advance of the meeting, so we can all read that and understand that, and then have more time for questions, or will it? I appreciate the last time because of how recently the election had taken place. It was a verbal update, and we were responding to that. So it's really, will this be a more traditional, formally tabled report, which we can then go into depth?
Yes, I have had those discussions around making sure that we have a formal report that this every activity and engagement. So.
Well, that will be useful. It's very hard to ask questions when you hear about something first, when somebody's told you 3 seconds before. I would never be any good on question time, I don't think. That's like Kevin Foster.
Just on the work programme, we have the housing quite high on the list as well. I think housing is quite critical. What you do, stretching is chatting.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that came out of the work programme and session that we had back in September time. I think was the housing and also transport.
Mr. Bishop.
Just a term I don't understand on the work plan. The word inactivity trailblaze, it seems like an oxymoron to me, the exact opposite of each other. What exactly is the inactivity trailblaze?
I'm going to Andrew.
Thank you. It's
there is one.
It's basically a programme that government announced in December, and we were to receive £10 million for next financial year. And it's called a trailblazer because we are blazing a trail in terms of how we get inactive people back to work.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Anything else members want to see forward through this? I mean, when do we start getting facts and figures on the local growth plan? I understand what Bob sort of said about between local plans, and we're actually mid starting a local plan, but how many acres of employment land does North Yorkshire need, for instance, as part of its? We've already been told how many houses we've got to build, but how many acres of employment land does the combined authority think we need to put in that local plan in order to service those houses that we build and make sure that people have viable opportunities for work? I'm just thinking, is there a time on this, or does it just drift a bit?
I think on your work plan at the moment, the local growth plan that you get in the 11th of March will just be the draft version that will be going to the combined authority later that month. I think that's right in terms of timing. So you'll just receive what's going out for consultation. I think in terms of your facts and figures bit, some of that will start to come slightly later, in the sense as we develop that draft into a much more detailed plan in terms of geographically and otherwise, then I think that's when it starts to come in. I think the specific question you ask about the combined authority saying this is how much employment land you need, I think it goes back to the answer to the question that was raised by Councillor Packham around that's a joint thing that we're talking to the local planning authorities about, because the local planning authorities are doing work on what the employment land requirements might be in terms of the numbers of houses, etc. And we would obviously want to be working closely. Timings don't quite align fully, but information will start to be shared on that.
Anybody else for anything else? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. And forgive me if we've visited this in the past and I've either missed it or not remembered. Given the fact that we have a very high chorusy level, and we were slightly late this morning, understandably, what decision has been taken about substitutes for this committee? And given the fact that we have our annual council coming up in May, is it something that should be on the agenda to look at how we can have substitutes or not?
It's been noted, and we are going to look at that because of the chorusy levels, and really have this morning. Say that way.
Sorry, thank you. But so at what point will we know whether we can or can't have subs? And the reason I'm asking is that we've got annual councils coming up in May. So if we are going to have substitutes, that's the time at which there'll be.
So
will we have plenty of time before then?
Yeah, be in touch about that.
Members think we should make a
Members think we should make a recommendation what it should be and how fast we should get this sorted out with substitutes. Because it's okay talking about it, but it just drift off, because it's quite important that that's so high that we didn't meet when we started. So just want to know what other members should do. Should we recommend a number that we should consider?
Recommendation of the combined authority into it.
Yes, it is a recommendation of the combined authorities. What I can do is I can get in touch with each of the democratic services managers from each of the councils to start that conversation. Our annual meeting is in June, so it's after your annual meetings. So if we get that conversation started sooner rather than later, to feed into your May meetings, which will then feed into our June meeting for the next municipal year.
As far as I'm aware, it's already been agreed by the combined authority that we will allow substitutes on the overview and scrutiny, or they will allow us to have substitutes. So the wheels are in motion to do it. So I don't think we need to send a letter from us saying you must do it. They're going to do it.
So is the amount of people that it's so high that it's like 4 people don't turn up, then you're in trouble.
And that's the national limit as well. So we can't get away from that. So we need to work it so.
Can I just clarify, are we talking about voting substitutes?
Yes.
So with voting, yes, thank you.
Yeah. But it'll have to be politically proportional and everything else and go through all the other things in order to, so it works, but yeah. So I think we can set our authorities up to do it, even though it hasn't been voted through, can't we? So those subs can come into place when the AGM of the combined authority comes through. I'm guessing that those people can then be adopted by the combined authority as well.
Yeah.
One of the reasons apparently why it wasn't done was because of register of interest of everybody else in the first year and just getting everything settled. Like, having to get raft of subs have to deal with as well wasn't worth it. Now it's getting more so. And we do need to be quorums. We do need to hold these on a regular basis, really, don't we? Got here today and there was only 7 of us here, then it just feels like we've all wasted our time, doesn't it? So that meeting will then have been cancelled, it gets moved and the dates get changed and then people's diaries get full and people can't turn up. So writing those meetings in the diary, really important, isn't it? So, and knowing that they're going to happen. So, yeah.
Yep, we'll link in and do it
So,
straight away.
so we're all happy with that. You know that we want it. On that note, are we happy with the work programme for now? So it's a movable document, so if anybody's mind, we'll keep adding to it. And dates and meetings.
It'd be helpful if we just have a conversation at the end of this meeting, just about timing to future meetings.
Timings for future meetings. I mean,
When we finish the,
when we closed it, right? So everybody happy with closing the meeting?